it's not even here yet. Oh, it is on? It's supposed to be green. Oh, no, it's supposed to be green. That's right. So you must, okay, so we're doing a test. Oh, you're going to do it?
Champlain Room audiocast test.
Testing 1, 2, test, test. Testing 1, 2.
Champlain test.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to First Planning Committee for 2014, the 67th meeting of the committee since this term of council began. It is Tuesday, the 14th of January. If you wish to speak to the committee with respect to any of the items that are listed on today's agenda, if you fill in a request to speak form that's located to the table to my far right under the big Ottawa sign, hand it to the committee assistant who's standing there. We'll make sure we get you on the speakers list. And if you don't want to wait for the period of time required and you'd just like to submit written comments to form part of the public record, there's a request to speak comment sheet under the big Ottawa sign over there by the front door where you can file your written comments on any of the items that are on today's agenda. So, this is a public meeting to consider the proposed zoning bylaw amendment listed as item 4 on today's agenda. For that item, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board if Council does not adopt an amendment within 120 days of receipt of an application for zoning and 180 days for an official plan amendment, and that's after the application is deemed complete. Une feuille de commentaires est disponible à l'entrée pour toute personne désirante soumettre des commentaires écrits concernant les modifications. So, there's a comment sheet at the door if you'd like to submit written comments. So, members of committee, we have had regrets from Councillor Shirelli, who will not be able to be here. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, confirmation of minutes. Minutes 66th, 10th of December 2013. Is that carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 1 is an application for new construction on Birch Avenue, properties designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. We have 3 people registered to speak. Derek Taylor and Steve Rogers, are you in opposition to the application? Yes. Okay. So we're going to come back. We're going to speak to the committee. Then Julian Jacobs is here on behalf of the architect. So we'll come back to that application. Item number 2 is an application for demolition and new construction at 215 McLeod Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to this item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 2, an application for demolition and new construction at 215 McLeod Street? Members of the committee, is this item carried? Carried. Item number 3 is something we haven't dealt with before committee since 2007. We have not had a plan of subdivision before committee since that time. Yeah, I know. And so we have a number of people who are in agreement and in opposition. So we will come back to that item. And Mr. Mark, when we come back to that item, if you just want to give us a quick rundown of what we are approving and not approving with respect to the plan of subdivision and the division of land, and with respect to other processes? Yes. Okay. Okay, item number 4 is the zoning at 172nd Avenue. There is one person registered to speak to the committee with respect to that item, John Kaczmarek. Mr. Kaczmarek, are you here? Yes. Are you in opposition to the recommendation? Sorry? Okay. Sorry. You're against it. Okay, good. So we'll come back to it, and you can we can hear from you. Item number 5, neighborhood lines for the Gladstone Station District and Preston and Carling Community Design Plans. We have no one registered to speak to that item and no correspondence. We did have a correspondence. Did we? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 5? No? You can indeed.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to say this is a way to give the neighborhood explicit assurance that we will protect the built low-rise neighborhood in that area. That's something we did in the Scott Street CDP, so we wanted to go back to do it for this CDP.
Right, and it delineates the line between one set of zoning and another, right? Okay, members of committee, are there any other speakers on this item? Is it carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 1 is an application for new construction on Birch Avenue, property designated under Part 5 of the Heritage, the Ontario Heritage Act. We have a number of speakers, and unless the committee wants a presentation, I would suggest we go to the speakers. Okay. So, Mr. Taylor, you're the first up. Right over here, sir. Please sit down and press the big button in front of you, and you can speak to.
Good morning. My name is Derek Taylor, and I am the owner of 55 Birch Avenue, one of the houses directly opposite the proposed ambassadorial residence. Today I am speaking on behalf of the owners of all 8 houses on Birch between Pond Street and Eastbourne Avenue, which directly face the site of the proposed construction, and on behalf of another 5 households on Birch between Eastbourne and Hemlock Road. Also present today from those households are Fiona Robinson, Stephen Rogers, Alison Laidlaw and Susan Clark. We, the Birch residents, were first informed about this application only very recently when the letter from the city arrived on December the 12th. It has since become apparent that discussions between the applicant, their architect, the city and the Rockcliffe Residents Association relating to this application had been continuing for a significant period of time prior to that date. I wish to point out, therefore, that today's meeting is the first time the Birch residents have had an opportunity to contribute to the discussion, to raise concerns and to make recommendations. Last week, on behalf of the same Birch residents, I sent a letter of concern regarding this application for your consideration, and I hope all of you have had a chance to read it. You will have received a number of emails from the same homeowners endorsing that letter. Our primary concern is the proposal to face the property onto Birch with its gates on Birch instead of facing it onto Pond Street in Rockcliffe. Another concern is the fencing planned for the property, and Stephen Rogers, my fellow Birch resident, has kindly agreed to speak to that matter in due course. I will address the primary issue regarding the orientation of the property and the location of the gates. Birch Avenue is a thoroughfare connecting the Rockcliffe Parkway to Hemlock Road and is a relatively busy street in our community. It is also an OC Transpo bus route. The new installation of traffic lights at the Birch-Hemlock intersection will intentionally increase bike traffic and will likely increase the volume of vehicular traffic on Birch. Placement of the gates to the proposed property on Birch Avenue will exacerbate the growing challenges of this already busy thoroughfare. The necessary RCMP vehicles and the parked cars associated with the new ambassadorial residence and the events held there will impede bus transit and interfere with the bikeway on this narrow road. In the winter, parking for visitors of the residence will be obstructed by the regular removal of snowbanks from this bus route. There is a bus stop very close to the proposed location of the gates and a sharp bend in the road just to the north of the Pond-Birch intersection. Parked cars on the west side of Birch Avenue next to the proposed site would impede access to the bus stop by buses and could constitute a hazard due to the bend in the road. Thus, placement of the gates to the proposed property on Birch and the resulting addition of traffic and parked cars will hinder the flow of cars, buses and bikes and create new hazards for road users and residents alike. Further to these issues of traffic and road safety, there is no precedent for having an ambassadorial residence located in Manor Park or on a bus route and bikeway. Rockcliffe is the home to many of Ottawa's embassy residences and provides quiet residential streets for purposes of privacy and ease of access. In an attempt to justify this application, the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement provided by the City states that, and I quote, "The new construction will reinforce Rockcliffe's role as Ottawa's preeminent site for residences of ambassadors," end quote. However, although the proposed residence is technically within the Rockcliffe boundary, placement of the gates on Birch is not consistent with the spirit of this statement. Instead, having the residence entrance on Pond Street facing into Rockcliffe Park, rather than facing it away from Rockcliffe onto Birch, would make the ambassadorial residence part of the Rockcliffe community. On Pond Avenue in Rockcliffe, there are really only 5 residences opposite the land in question, and one of these is the Kenyan Embassy residence. By virtue of their orientation, none of these houses face the land as directly as do the houses on Birch. We would, however, like to make a recommendation that further reduces the impact of this new construction on the local community, including those residents in Rockcliffe. By placing a single gate to the property on the corner of the land at the intersection of Pond Street and Lakeway Drive, the property would be immediately visible only to the Kenyan Embassy residents, and the view of trees to which the neighbouring homes, both in Rockcliffe and Manor Park, have been accustomed, would be preserved. In addition, this proposal would enhance the privacy and security of the new Iraqi ambassadorial residence. Rotating the residence to face this corner would facilitate this proposal. I have contacted Mr. Nadir, the applicant's engineer and representative at the Iraqi embassy, to express these concerns, and he is sympathetic. He explained that there was an original plan in place to face the residence onto Pond Street, but that this was changed. Speaking for the applicant, he reassured me that the applicant is keen to address the concerns of all immediate neighbours, including those on Birch, and that the applicant would be open to an alternative orientation of the building if it better served the interests of the local community. In summary, the proposed plan to locate the gates on Birch Avenue poses a number of problems. First, it is not in keeping with the norm of locating embassy residences within the Rockcliffe Park community. Second, it is not consistent with the city's vision for Birch Avenue, especially in the light of the recent enhancements to the bikeway in this neighbourhood. And third, and most importantly, Birch Avenue is a busy thoroughfare and an OC Transpo route. Additional parked cars, including RCMP vehicles, will impede bus transit, interfere with the bikeway, and make this section of narrow road more hazardous. In the light of the shared and strong concerns of the majority of residents living opposite the property, we submit that the best solution for all stakeholders and for the community at large is to relocate the entrance onto Pond Street. In addition, we ask the City to consider our proposal for a single gate to the property located at the Pond Lakeway intersection, which will minimise the impact on both the Manor Park and Rockcliffe communities. I would like to finish by posing a simple question. Given the number of legitimate concerns relating to this application and the very reasonable solution offered that addresses them, what justification remains for placing the gates to this new ambassadorial residence on Birch Avenue? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from members of committee? Okay. I just have, Mr. Smith, I may have a question for you in a minute here, but there are 5 individual lots here. Do none of them front on Birch?
Some of them do front onto Birch.
If I came in and built as lot of record, I would have a driveway out onto Birch.
That's correct.
So, okay. But I guess there's, in your mind, there must be a difference between big Rockcliffe houses and an embassy.
In my mind, there's a choice here to front and open the embassy onto Birch, or to front and open it onto Pond Street, and that the latter is the better solution, for the reasons I've pointed out.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Harder.
I just, for my recollection, at the Built Heritage, I think that this question came up and we asked, or staff said that they had, actually the applicant said that they had looked at that, but they wanted to preserve the most of the forest, I think. Am I recalling that correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's my recollection as well. And I have never seen a plan for it oriented the other way. It was never presented to the city in that way. But my understanding is that this orientation would preserve the most trees possible, which was part of the city's goal in supporting the application, was to preserve the landscape.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Mr. Rogers, if you'd like to come up.
My name is Steve Rogers. I'm a resident on Birch Street at 47, directly across from the proposed development. I just want to start out by saying that I'm fully supportive of all the points that Derek put forth as to why the orientation should be considered to be relocated to face onto the quieter Birch Street corridors. Sorry. In terms of the nature of an ambassadorial residence versus a typical residence, there's much more traffic associated with events at the home of an ambassador. There's increased security coverage by the special patrol officers, so that means increased police traffic and parking associated with that activity. So it is very different than a typical home that would be on a single lot. You know, in addition to what Derek has put forward as rationale for considering reorienting the building to pond, I'd like to address the issue of the fencing. You know, we certainly recognize that a residence has security requirements that would require them to put a perimeter fence in, but we would ask that we consider having it set back further than what we understand it to be set back at this point. The stretch of street between Pond and Hemlock on the west side that's going to be impacted by this proposed development currently has no houses facing out on it. All the Rockcliffe houses that do exist there closer to the Hemlock side face into Rockcliffe, and we would ask that for consistency that be considered as criteria for orientation, and also, you know, to consider an increased setback for the fence that needs to go into this project. Existing houses, again, that do have fencing along their backyards, it's recessed quite significantly with a significant barrier of natural trees between that fencing and Birch Street, which means it maintains a very natural look. The way we understand the fencing to go right now, the fencing becomes the dominant streetscape feature as opposed to the trees. So I think that's an important element of the design that needs to be considered as you look at how this ends up being approved.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Hobbs? Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. Julian Jacobs is our next presenter. Mr. Jacobs, if you'd like to come up. But Councillor Hobbs, you have a question for Mr. Smith?
Thanks very much. Mr. Chair, in regards to the fencing, I think I remember from Heritage Committee, or Heritage Subcommittee, sorry, that the fencing wasn't a really necessary element, that it's more of a decorative element, that it wasn't required for security. Can you elaborate on that maybe?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding, and Mr. Jacobs may be able to better elaborate on this, the fencing is obviously not the key security feature for the ambassador's residence. It's a deterrent, obviously, but there are other security things that the embassy will do on the property. But the intention is that there would be planting in front of the fencing to screen it from the street.
So it's not meant to be a fortress-type fencing or, you know,
it will not be like what's on Lansdowne Road right now.
Okay, thank you.
That's not necessarily an embassy on Lansdowne, is it? Those are private residences. But that's, you were just describing the fencing. Ah, okay. Good, okay. So, Mr. Jacobs.
Well, I can start with the fence if you like. The fence is 4 to 5 feet. It's a wrought iron, decorative wrought iron fence. And it's screened by, it's screened by landscaping and hedging along its entire perimeter along Birch Street. So it'll be almost invisible to the passerby. So it's nothing like what you experienced in the past. The reason we picked, once we get the plan up on the screen, about that one there, right? I just want to look at the plan. There's several reasons why we picked this site or this location. One is it's the best access for egress and for egress and ingress, and it's closest to the main street, which is Hemlock to the left in the drawing, south in the drawing. This is important to the embassy and the delegation that visited the site from Baghdad, that the importance to connect to a main street for security reasons and for access reasons is really important. So that's why they picked, that's one of the reasons we picked this location. As far as the history goes of the design, in every project we do, we look at all the options. We therefore looked at McNabb, and we looked at Pond, and by far the most superior option was this option. One of the things that this site benefits from in this design is the maximization of trees. If you turn this entire project around to face Pond, the entire north half of the site gets denuded of trees. And all you're left with is a clump of trees on the left-hand side. If you cut the site in half and turn the building around 90 degrees so that the two egress and access face Pond, you'll find that half the site will be denuded of trees. We did a sketch, and that's what we found out. So that's the opposite of what we want to intend. The intention is to maximize the screening of the house and its outdoor courtyard from the street, and to create privacy for the residents. We want to minimize, at the same time, that would minimize the impact on Birch and on the neighborhood, so that for 3/4 of the site, the elevation of the building is trees. It's an elevation of trees. And in discussions with the city and on ratepayers, we've created a screen wall along behind the hedge and fencing, and in between where you see the big, large clusters of trees. We've added trees, and coniferous trees. Our landscape architect, Jim Lennox, has done on our behalf, and basically created a treed elevation along in that space where the existing trees are cut back on the sides. That entire area is going to be treed with new trees, which are coniferous and deciduous, which will help because right now the trees mostly are deciduous. This is one of the benefits that we discussed earlier on with neighbors, and that is to maximize the screening of the property. There are other ways, as far as coming to the fence aspect. The fencing will be very minimal. There will be some other means, higher technology means, to create security for the site at the perimeter, and it won't be related to fencing. And the other thing it does is this site, this is the longest facade along the street front. And what this does is increases the distance from any egress or access point, the 2 points coming into the site, from the corner. And that's a health and safety issue. If you rotate the site, the building, to face Pond, because Pond's a smaller street, you get closer to the corners with the entrance and egress, which is more dangerous. The other problem with Pond is that it's a curving street, so that you're very close. The driveway, the ingress and egress on one side would be very close to the curve, or on a curve. And that's dangerous. It's not a good idea to have an entrance. I'm not sure even the traffic department would even accept it. And it would be dangerous. It would be not acceptable to us and to anybody. Those are my main points. I think we've covered it, what we have to say in response.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Mr. Jacobs? No? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
That that's the last registered speaker on this item, so I'm going to close the public hearing portion of the meeting and turn the recommendations back to committee. So what you have before you are what is coming out of the Built Heritage Subcommittee and recommended to us and Council for approval. So on the item, is it carried? Carried. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 3, draft plan of subdivision, 850 Champlain Street. So, Mr. Mark, if you'd like to give us, since we have not had a plan of subdivision before this committee in, I guess, 2014, 7 years, if you just want to run through what we're actually approving here and the main points, that would be helpful.
Mr. Chair, I'll give an answer in the context of this particular application, which is not your standard residential subdivision. This is an application for draft plan approval under Section 51 of the Planning Act. First and foremost, what is at issue is how the land is going to be divided, hence the name subdivision. Secondly, a significant issue with subdivisions is how services are going, pardon me, Mr. Chair, how the services are going to be brought to the subdivision itself, and the general conditions of subdivision approval. What is not at issue, of course, is the land use. That is a matter for zoning. And this subdivision is composed of a number of blocks, and so those will be developed pursuant to site plan, and so the specific elements of how those blocks will be developed are also not at issue at this time. They would be subject to a Section 41 site plan approval application in the future.
Section 41, okay. So, members of committee, just as Mr. Mark said, if you turn your mind when we start to hear the delegations, how the land is to be divided, and I assume when you mean divided, Mr. Mark, into the allocation of public roadways and parcel sizes, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And how services, and you mean water, stormwater, sanitary sewer, are brought to the site.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay, so members of the committee will focus on those items as we hear from the delegation, recognizing that land use is a matter for the zoning, which I understand is already in place, and these will be subject to future site plan application as the development on the parcels that we create today occurs. So, members of committee, do we require a presentation? Okay. Maybe if there are questions, if someone wants to, who's coming up to speak to this? Oh, there you go. Okay. So, Mr. Jim McDonald, if you'd like to come forward. Is Mr. McDonald here?
Mr. Chair, I received an email. I thought you had sent it to the planning committee that he was not able to attend, but he wanted his comments in the report if possible.
And we will do that.
Thank you.
Bernadette Simvera, sorry if I make that mistake. Are you here? No? Okay. We will note that she registered to speak. Lisa Picknell, if you'd like to come up and speak to the committee. Good morning. Good morning.
Speak on this? Okay. Good morning. I'm Lisa Picknell. I live right on Champlain, in the middle of the street of this project. I have 2 points. It's the entrances and exit of that project, which is in front of our house. And the other one is the traffic that would bring on Champlain between south and north. Okay. And just a clarification, Champlain is a street that has exit or entrance to the 174 highway. My concern is, because I live on Champlain, it's right now, by doing an entrance, there's no way we'll be able to back up or actually go in our house, because there'll be too much traffic. I don't have a chance to get out of my entrance right now. And the lights at the end of north and the one at south is Jeanne d'Arc, and the entrance at that's Jeanne d'Arc. And the other end, there's lights already, so that helps us to back up right now, so it controls the traffic. But if you put 2 more entrances, now the plan is for 1 entrance on Champlain, but still, if people go in or out of that entrance on your left, it will bring too much traffic, and it actually it could be very dangerous when we back up to each other, or to come in each other. Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's a public road right now that presented on the plan is one on Champlain right now. So that's what you are? Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Yes. Okay. What I don't understand is they have the main street in the middle, so why, I'm asking the committee to consider, why do they need another exit on Champlain and even on Bilberry? The street is right in the middle, there's no house at the end of north and south, so just do a sidewalk, and there's already a sidewalk on Champlain, so they could use to walk for the transit or Place d'Orleans, which is perfect. So my recommendation is that you cancel those entrances on Champlain, which they don't need, and so they could use the other 2 ends. And to consider, in wintertime, just 2 weeks ago with the snowstorm, with the winter, la neige, it was so high, but I understand the city has to take the time and wait for the winter the snowstorm to finish. So it's actually very dangerous to back up right now. They took it off, but it takes 2 weeks, so plus traffic. The other thing about traffic, you already approved Minto Quarry project, which they only have 1 entrance to that beautiful project, but it brings more traffic again, and it's not finished. People are still moving. The last tenants will be in the spring. So the study about traffic was done in 2009, and if you look at the time they did the traffic study, it's between 8 and 4, which is not the time of the biggest traffic on Champlain. So this is my concern. I'd like to address that to the committee.
Thank you very much. And I guess I should explain, because it's a little complicated, that even if we eliminated the public road, even if it wasn't a city street, the proponent, the owner of the land, could still apply through the site plan process for some access out onto that roadway through the private approach bylaws. Is that not correct, Mr. Mark?
Yes, Mr. Chair, you are.
The only thing we would be doing at this stage of the game is it wouldn't be a city road built to city standards. So if we said no
entrance,
no public roadway there, it doesn't mean that there would never be an access out onto Champlain. The only way you could do that is when each individual application came forward, the councillor would have to, and there was a site plan for whether it's the office or the residential, structure it that it wouldn't preclude, that it wouldn't allow an access onto Champlain. But at this point, we can't preclude it. We can't say that it won't happen.
Okay.
Just so you know.
I understand.
Okay, are there any other questions for the delegation? Sure. I don't know.
Just a question to staff about the traffic. The comments the delegation made about when the traffic count was done. First of all, if it's is the data now so dated that it's no longer relevant? And secondly, the timing of it, if it's from 9 to 4, I would agree with the delegation that does not capture when the real traffic pressures are present. So can you comment on those 2 points? Through you, Mr. Chair, as part of this application, a traffic report was prepared, and the traffic volumes that were used were representative of what we expect the traffic and volumes to be in that kind of type of street. With regards to the volumes and the distribution of those volumes through the site and along Jeanne d'Arc and Champlain, we're comfortable that these two access points, the one on Jeanne d'Arc and the one on Champlain, is sufficient to allow good traffic flow. There's also to the south of the site, there's a signalized entrance that's shared with the OC Transport Park and Ride that we've been able to improve, and to the point where we were confident that a good amount of that flow will use that intersection. The analysis also shows, and we've reviewed it and are in agreement, that the intersections at Jeanne d'Arc and Champlain the volumes are such that it does not require signalization, although it does provide for full access at those two intersections.
I can add to that the data that was used is the latest data available from the city, and in addition to that, data has been, or projections from the development in Quarry Glen, which is one of the developments that Ms. Pignell was referring to, has also been included, as well as the on-site traffic generated here.
Mr. Petty, can you tell me, is the roadway an arterial collector? What kind of roadway is it classified as? Champlain.
It's a collector.
It's a collector roadway. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation? Thank you very much for your presentation. Julie Lepine, if you'd like to come up.
Good morning. I'm Julie Lepine, and I live at 1159 Place d'Érable, which is a cul-de-sac that backs onto the Park and Ride. It's not represented in this image, but if you could change the image to the one that shows the full site plan leading into the 20-year plan. Or the one before that, if you could. Yeah, I'm right in there. I just have a few questions for the purposes of approving this draft plan, and I'm assuming that's to be done today. By approving the plan, are you approving details of the 20-year plan that was previously presented to the community, including building locations and whatnot? With, of course, the exception of sections 29 to 42 in this document, which talk about the transit, and I'm all good with that for the 20-year plan, because there's a reference to a 20-year plan in this draft plan, and obviously I have an issue with the 20-year plan, not necessarily the 5-year plan, and it has to do with the 8-story and the 7-story office tower that will be right in my backyard, unfortunately. I just want to make sure by this being approved that I'm not missing my opportunity to voice myself about the positioning of those buildings. I'm not opposed to having the buildings. The positioning I'm not really keen on, because the people in those office towers will be able to look right into my backyard, and I believe that this does not represent where my house is in this plan. That you see up on the screen right now. You can't even see it on the screen. The representation is incorrect. My house is much closer to the zone line, I guess, from the condo property to the municipal property of the Park and Ride. No, it's not that low. It's much higher than that. In fact, this morning I walked from the back of my backyard to the line of the city property, and it's 90 feet.
So and you're talking about this plan right here?
Yes.
Okay. So which buildings are you talking about? The two 8-story buildings?
Yeah, that will be in part of the 20-year plan. Yes, the 7- and 8-story buildings.
Okay, I don't have a 7-story building on my plan, but...
On the other side for the 20-year plan. Now, I know...
Okay, those are 7, 8. In mine, they're 9 and 11. So there you go.
There you go.
And I guess the answer to that is those will be determined through their location, and setbacks are determined, well, the zoning determines the setbacks from all of the property line, which I understand is in place now, but the exact location of the buildings will be determined through the site plan process.
Perfect.
So what we're doing today is creating the lot in which a building will be placed.
Okay.
So you will have an opportunity to go back and say, this needs to be further away. We can't mandate a larger setback, and I don't know what the setbacks are on that lot. Maybe you can tell me.
Through you, Mr. Chair. If you look at the red lines that are on the plan that's up on the screen, you actually see where those zoning lines are, A, B, and C. A being the lowest height at 11 meters and C being the no-limit height. I mean, it hasn't been taken around, to the side past the property line of the site itself. And we're looking at the Minto land only at this point. In the concept plan, and the purpose of the concept was for the applicant to demonstrate to us that they could meet the official plan requirements, which in the Orleans Town Center area north of the highway is 3,000 jobs.
Okay, so, sorry, just for my, in Area 1, that's the Minto lands. Area 2 is whose lands?
Our land, the city's land.
Our lands.
Okay. So that
it just got a lot better for you. I'm just telling you, it just got a lot better for you.
It's currently used as a city's park and ride.
Right.
And it's a transit station as well.
Yeah.
So it has only been included on the 20-year concept plan to demonstrate in the long term how the 3,000 jobs could be achieved in order for us to be able to support the plan of subdivision, which is in a mixed-use center, town center.
So those buildings are
fictitious.
Yeah.
And conceptual.
So your question is, the answer to your question is, are those where the buildings are going to go? No. That will be determined if at all, if they ever appear, that would be something that would develop through the site plan process. They're not part of the Minto lands, and they're part of our holdings. And okay, so they'd have to be rezoned. So there's a whole big process to go through. So you're in fairly safe territory.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much. But there is a reference to the 20-year plan in here. So
yes.
I want to make sure that by approving this, that
you're not getting the buildings in those
locations. The other package that I've already seen doesn't get approved as well.
You're right. It is, and you're right. It's not. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, let me go to. There is. Okay, I don't know if there's any more members of the public other than the applicant who has registered to speak. Mr. Jack and Mr. Baker, you're here to answer questions on Beth Henderson is here on behalf of the applicant, right? Yeah. Mr. Jack and Mr. Baker are here on behalf of the applicant. Ms. Sweet, Mr. Thomas, and Mr. Fitzpatrick on behalf of the applicant. Are there any members of the public who wish to...
On that topic, Mr. Chair, did we receive the comments from the Community Association also? Are they on record?
We would have. Just a second, and I'll tell you.
If not, I can provide you all of it.
We've received a number of, just a second, if I can find them.
Would be from me and Gadbois from
who would have signed the...
Mr. Goldberger is his name, I believe.
Mr. Goldberg?
Claude Goldberger?
Yeah, we have them right here, Councillor. They've been... yes.
Thank you.
So there you go. On behalf of the Covent Glen and Orleans Wood Community Association, yes, they've been filed and circulated to the committee. Okay, Ms. Henderson, if you and your team would like to come down. Since there's no other members of the public who wish to speak. Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Pleasure to be here this morning, and we welcome the opportunity to provide committee its 7-year primer on a plan of subdivision application. We are in support of the conditions as set out by staff, and we have our consulting team here and are available to answer any questions you might have of the application. I think it's probably already been recognized, but it's important to recognize that this is a site that is already zoned. The application that we've filed for subdivision conforms to the official plan and the community plan. We went to the extent of preparing 2 demonstration plans to assist the city in the analysis of what can happen on this very exciting mixed-use block. We look forward to the opportunity of it developing over the next number of years as the city continues to go and transit is extended to this area. We see it as an exciting opportunity for the development of the eastern community of this city. We appreciate the input and the time the ward councillor has taken in handling this application. We had 2 very good community meetings where I think a lot of information was provided, and we certainly made ourselves available with all our consultants for those meetings, and we will continue in the future. We recognize that site plan applications will be required on all the blocks as we proceed through the planning process, and we look forward to the successful completion of those on a block-by-block basis and bringing an exciting development to the city.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Sterling, or is there anything else you want to add, your team wants to add? And before we get to questions, Mr.
Just briefly to answer Councillor Bowe's question earlier about the traffic counts. The city does their counts starting at 7 a.m. in the morning through to 7 at night, and from those counts they identify what the peak hours are. So it can vary, as you know, it can be 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, 8 to 9, 7 to 8. But the data starts at 7 o'clock, so I don't think anywhere in the city is the peak hour actually before 7. Even out here, it's in the, even though there are the commuters starting earlier, so we're quite comfortable that the peak hours do get captured.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Sterling? So, Mr. Sterling, I'm just going to say, I just hope, based on this, that I don't see every one of your site plans before planning committee. So if you can figure out a way to make that happen, I'm all for it.
Well, I can assure you each site plan will be submitted in accordance with city policy, which right now is a delegated approval through staff, and we will see how those proceed.
Yes. Okay. Councillor Manette.
Okay. So questions to staff at this point?
Delegation, no? Okay.
Maybe a quick comment, especially on just your comment about 7 years. I'd like to also thank Minto for their cooperation. This has been an ongoing project since I've been elected in 2006. That was the first time in 2006. In fact, they've had this land now, if I believe, for 30 or 40 years, where it's been sitting vacant. And we've seen many versions of this land. And with Minto, recently, the last 2-3 years, we've been working diligently trying to find the right compromise that would increase the amount of jobs into that in that portion of land. And I just want to say thank you for the cooperation, for attending the public meetings, for being flexible. As the first proposal was all residential, and we've come a long way since then, and we are looking at employment. And I'll leave the rest for my closing remarks, but I want to make sure to say thank you.
No further questions for...
I would only make the comment that I'm glad you clarified for the previous speaker that that is city-owned land.
Yes.
It actually was Minto-owned land, but the city acquired it for the park and ride. And in fact, we have owned this property for in excess of 35 years.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for your presentations. So I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this meeting, and I'm going to turn the hearing back to the committee, and Councillor Minna has questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few questions. First one is, Councillor Blows had touched on the traffic study, and so did Lisa. What was the date of the most recent traffic study completion? Do we have that?
We'll have to ask that question to the traffic engineer.
Okay, we don't have that. Okay.
Well, there's a combination of. I think we're on, Jack. Please.
Sure, Mr. Jack. Go on, sit down.
The community transportation study was dated July 2013, and then following city comments and review of that, we would have prepared addendums to address the questions. And as you've mentioned, you've been involved in this site for a long time, so I think this is the third traffic study we've done for various applications, but the current one that was submitted as part of the application was July 2013.
Okay. When the study was done, Quarry Glen, the completion of Quarry Glen was part of that study? I believe Julie mentioned that, or?
Yeah, my understanding is there's about 180 units, and maybe half of them are occupied now.
Okay.
So I think what you're getting at is the base traffic counts that we obtained from the city or did ourselves would not include specifically Quarry Glen traffic. But when we do our analysis, we add in traffic from this project plus background traffic growth to account for other things happening. So it's indirectly been accounted for by the background traffic growth factor.
Okay. Well, was the potential of LRT at Place Orleans taken into consideration with the traffic study, or is that something that could be looked at as we move forward with more further applications?
Well, LRT is a way from getting out here, but the reality is you do have rapid transit there now. It's just bus-based, and I think Orleans has 35% transit ridership in the peak hours going downtown, so there's already a very high-quality rapid transit from this park and ride lot. In our analysis, I think we assumed, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, about 40 to 45% transit ridership moving forward. So we're accounting for the existing rapid transit and future growth in transit ridership from this site.
Okay. I think it will be very important as we move forward. I mean, if we do get LRT to Orleans, that will be definitely more people going to the park and ride. In fact, the park and ride that we have right now and that's proposed for buildings, I would foresee that an expansion of the park and ride down the road, whether at that location or another location, but we could be attracting a lot more vehicles to the park and ride. So that should be looked at as we move forward. I think it's something that residents have brought up, the community association has brought up. And I think it's a very valid comment. Okay, thank you.
So the traffic study was used to justify the blocking of the public road, right? So all of the other accesses and traffic movements along Champlain are going to be studied as each individual site plan comes forward.
That's correct.
So if nothing moves here for 3 years, the next time an application comes forward for, I don't know, any one of these buildings, they'll have to do and it's graduated. It's a traffic impact statement. It's a full-blown review or whatever the requirements call for. So at that time, circumstances at that slice in time will be evaluated.
That's correct. So that allows us to not only understand better what's happening on that block of land, but also any changes to traffic patterns or other influences.
Yeah, and given that site plans are delegated to the councillor, well, your approval subject to his concurrence, he has an ability to say, look, I really need some more in-depth review on this traffic situation.
Absolutely.
Correct. Okay.
Thank you for the clarification. Is that something that was a concern for the residents? And it's a very valid concern. One issue that we had at the most recent public meeting was that the park and ride entrance was not being considered. There was 2 entrances on Champlain. And I stated at the public meeting, and I felt it was very crucial that we have a entrance at the park and ride so that the majority of the traffic will be directed through the middle of your project. And I was wondering, where are we with that discussion? Has OC Transpo agreed to cooperate with the city to put in an entrance at the park and ride location?
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, through the councillor's suggestion, we had discussions with OC Transpo, and we were able to, along with the applicant's cooperation, provide a better entrance and improve the access to the proposed site as well as the park and ride, and also generate a few extra parking spots. So everybody came away from that table satisfied with that exercise. So thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Because I think ideally, that's where we want to direct as much of the traffic as possible, not on Champlain. Subsequent to that, I believe that the committee members have an amendment that's been proposed, and it's moved by myself that document 3 and report, I won't read all the numbers, be amended by removing the following text form from condition 11 under roadway modification: northbound lane on Champlain Street approaching site, south driveway. If this is approved, am I correct to assume that if there is a proposal down the road, that I am able to bring it back at the table for discussion with the residents?
Yes, and as the chair explained, that this discussion or topic is best suited for the site plan discussions rather than the subdivision discussion. So this cleans up the report and appropriately sets the decision making at the right stages in the process.
That's about all for the questions right now. I will have closing remarks if nobody else has any.
I just want to be clear on that point, Mr. Petty, that it doesn't, the elimination takes it out of the subdivision process and puts the debate where it rightly belongs in the site plan process, because they would be making an application under the private approaches bylaw to deal with a private access, as opposed to blocking that out as a public access.
That's right. This puts that decision at the time when we have the detailed information at site plan.
Right. At the time when all the traffic information is timely, I guess, for lack of a better word.
That's right.
Right. Okay. But it doesn't prohibit it from occurring. I just want to make sure of that.
No. This motion does not prohibit that access
or that discussion.
Or that discussion.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Councillor Blake?
Yeah, just to final on this for questions, as you brought up a good point there. That's what this condition is for. That's being moved forward, is to ensure that the residents do have input into the process, and I will be making my rationale as we move forward with the closing remarks. But one of the things that is important with this, that if I need to remove delegated authority, I'm able to do so, correct?
Yes, with confirmation from the city solicitor, yes, you are.
Thank you.
Councillor, please. Councillor Blake.
Thanks. Just to confirm that with the removal of the public road at this stage and the process that
it was never proposed, I don't think, to be a public road.
Oh, which one is being removed then? I thought it was the public road.
No,
this is an access that was shown in the concept plan.
So it's a private approach access.
So it's private, yes.
Private approach access.
Okay. The public road is staying.
Yes.
Okay.
Public road stays. Okay. Okay. So, Okay. Councillor Manette, if you want to bring us to a conclusion.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And you are right. This has never been done, from myself anyways, since I've been elected in 2006. But this is a file that I've been working on, and all these 10 councillors have been working on, to ensure that we have employment in Orleans. And there's been a lot of meetings. There's been a lot of different proposals brought forward. Is this the best proposal? No. I mean, I think ideally I would have liked to have seen all the land as employment. But I also believe that there is a factor that we have to move forward, and we have to maximize the land that we have. When it comes to this issue, I did remove delegated authority because it was important. The residents at the public meetings had major concerns about traffic on Champlain. That was their major concern. That's why with this one here, I removed it. And unless I could have came into an agreement, and there was a lot of discussion, I was not able to do so. One of the things that both Minto and myself agreed on, that the entrance to the park and ride was the ideal location and the primary location, and I'm glad that we moved forward with that. Now, I don't really want to come back with delegated authority on the other one, but we will have that discussion. We will also have a discussion about can we modify an entrance if there is an entrance, so that it does not have impact on residents of Champlain. I think at this point I will leave it at that. I think the project, what we're voting for today, is strictly the streetscape of what we're looking at. We're not voting for buildings. When we're looking at the future 20-year plan, that is correct what was stated. It is city property. It's the city had taken it over for the park and ride. I think with light rail coming to Orleans, we're hopefully breaking ground with that the next term of council, and hopefully by 2022 we will see light rail in Orleans. We will need added parking ride to have that to become a success for our ridership. So there will be a lot of discussion as we move forward. We need employment buildings. We also need residents to be able to access the light rail when we do have it. And it will be very important for the future of our community. So today, the only amendment that I'd like to bring forward is what I brought forward, and I hope that my colleagues will support it also. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So on the amendment which changes condition 11, which recognizes that the south driveway is not a public roadway, but will be determined through the site plan process. Is that carried? Carried. Okay. On the report as amended, items number 1 and 2, is that carried? Carried. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 4, the infamous 2nd Avenue garage. Counselor, I couldn't help it, honestly couldn't help it.
He's one of those, be careful what you ask for.
Yes, no. Members of committee, I can appreciate that you all know what this is about. It's a parking garage on our parking lot behind, I want to say, is it Davidson's? Behind the McKean, the Metro. I was going to say IGA, I don't know why, but there you go.
It used to be.
It used to be. So this is the zoning that allows you to implement the multi-story parking lot. I don't know that we need a presentation. Would we just like to hear from Mr. Kaczmarek? Is that fair? Okay, Mr. Kaczmarek, if you'd like to come up.
name is John Kazmarek, and I'd like to express my concern about the parking garage structure to be constructed at 172nd Avenue in the Glebe. I own the property at 123.5 3rd Avenue, which is located directly adjacent on the west side of the parking garage. And I have three main concerns that I've already expressed to city staff and Mr. Chernishchenko. I'm sorry. The current proposal for the by the City of Ottawa is to amend the existing residential R3 zoning to allow for the commercial garage structure and to utilize the existing R3 setback provisions. These setback provisions are intended to establish setbacks for low-density residential property and do not take into consideration the massive size and scale of the garage structure adjacent to my property at 123 3rd Avenue. The setback suggested by the current proposal on the west side of the garage structure adjacent to my property is 1.5 meters. The maximum permitted setback under the R3 zoning is 3 meters. I would like the setback on the west side of the garage structure to be revised to 3 meters. In an effort to support my request, I visited two existing parking garages, one on Hamilton Avenue in the Civic Hospital area and the other on Murray Street in the Byward Market. The parking garage on Hamilton Avenue abuts a residential house to the north, and the setback from the lot line of this property is approximately 3.05 meters. Illustrations or pictures I've taken are provided in the written submission that I've emailed to the committee coordinator. I don't know if you've got that on your screens. So the parking garage on Murray Street offers a buffer between the adjacent residential properties to the east and west by way of a walkway on one side and a laneway on the other side of the building. The current proposed amendment to the existing R3 zone does not take into consideration the size and scope of the parking garage, and the setback of 1.5 meters is unreasonable and unfair and should be revised to 3 meters on the west side adjacent to my property. Secondly, I have requested that the west-facing wall of the parking garage be a solid concrete or brick wall. The current plan includes openings to the west and a metal screen structure meant to provide privacy. My property, 123.5 3rd Avenue, is a triplex, and I have had some potential tenants decide not to rent at this location due to concerns about noise and air pollution because of the proximity of my property to the existing open parking lot. The impact from a 4-story parking garage is much more detrimental and is certain to affect my livelihood in that I anticipate having difficulty renting my apartments. Adverse conditions including constant noise of car doors slamming, horns honking, tires squealing, people talking and yelling, air pollution, and massive traffic jams during special events at Lansdowne Park. For this reason, I requested that the west-facing wall be a solid wall with no openings. To lend support to my argument, once again, I refer to the two existing parking structures on Hamilton Avenue and on Murray Street. Both of these structures possess solid concrete or brick walls on the sides that lie adjacent to residential property. And lastly, I've gone door to door on 3rd Avenue, and residents are generally not pleased with the white concrete garage design that has been chosen for 172nd Avenue. When the process began, the city assured residents that there would be a design process that would ensure that the garage structure conformed to the character of the neighborhood. Residents repeatedly suggested that the structure be brick, as most of the surrounding properties, in fact, most of the properties in the Glebe are brick. To my knowledge, only 3 designs were offered for review in the design process by the designer appointed by the city, and each of these designs were white concrete structures that are better suited for an airport or a shopping mall. Once again, I refer to the parking garage on Murray Street, At first glance, it looks like a residential apartment complex. So I would hope that somehow we could implement something on 2nd Avenue that would look similar to the Murray Street property. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, but it's a design that I would hope could be implemented or adopted on 2nd Avenue. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard, and I thank you.
I think that the big issue that you've raised is relative to the zoning is the setback. Maybe we can address that setback issue. Why it's only 1.5 meters and not 3 meters as the abutting that property line?
The current bylaw requirement is 1.2, and they are proposing a 1.5 meter setback. The maximum 3 meter setback that he's referring to is actually in relation to the front yard setback. We don't have a maximum setback for our interior side yards.
Okay, so I'm reading this. It says, in column, details of recommended zoning, page 8 well, I guess it's page 8 of your report. For all other, the provisions that apply to the parking garage, easterly and westerly side yard, point 2 and 1.5, but for all other, the minimum setback from the lot line abutting second is 1.5, and the maximum setback from that same lot line is 0.3. So that, am I reading the wrong property lines?
Yeah, for all other permitted uses, that's in reference to the front yard setbacks.
Oh, those are the front yard setbacks. Yeah. They're not
the interior side yard setbacks.
Okay. So the interior side yard setbacks that exist today are
1.2.
1.2 on both sides.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Is that based on an R3 zoning? That's based on a typical house next to another house under an R3 zoning. It doesn't take into consideration the fact that this is a garage structure. Should the zoning not be amended to?
Can have to.
Yeah.
You guys can have a debate about that over here and with your counselor. The issue though for us, the existing zoning on the site, and I'll ask his question, but is R3?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what are typical setbacks when we're putting up a parking garage?
Mr. Chairman, I think it varies depending on context. In this situation, there was an intention to keep the R3 zoning. The R3 zoning carries a 1.2 meter minimum setback for a side yard.
I see what you've done.
In this instance, we've increased it to 1.5. I think when you look at the size of the property and the functionality of the interior organization of the parking lot, you pretty well need that. On the other side, it's 1.2. You start reducing, you start impacting functionality.
So what you've done here, and I didn't realize it until I saw it, is you're keeping the R3 zone, you're adding an exception, and then you keep everything else. Parking garage is now a permitted use, and you have some, and when you place the permitted use in, you put your new side yards, new setbacks in.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So this, even though the setback is 1.7, you said?
It's 1.5.
1.5. Why would 3 meters not be more appropriate?
When we looked at the functionality of the parking garage and to accommodate the amount of parking spaces that were required under the council direction, these are the setbacks that were required to make the building function, and they were the requirements in the existing zone, and they were exceeding the requirements in the existing zone. I felt that was appropriate.
Right. So if we were, we're accommodating the functionality of the design. What's the best practice when you're putting a parking garage next to a house?
Again, I think that's where it varies, Mr. Chairman. In this situation, clearly this side that's adjacent to the delegation made reference to having it as a solid wall condition. This wall will be relatively solid. There will be some openings, and that's really to allow for more natural ventilation. But you've got a void then between
the base and the adjacent property line, and what's that void going to be used for. We're quite satisfied that the 1.5 meter separation is reasonable. It allows for maintenance on both sides. It's basically a 3-story building similar to the scale of buildings that you would see in an R3 zone. It's a solid wall condition. There are no overlook issues, and given the scale of this project and its immediate context, we're quite comfortable that this is an appropriate setback.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the delegation? Thank you very much for your presentation. There's no one else who's registered to speak to the committee with respect to this item, so I'm going to close the public hearing portion of the meeting and turn the recommendations back to committee. And we have a recommendation in front of us for the zoning at 172nd Avenue. So, Speaker, do you want to speak to this for us, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just speak briefly to this. About the very last thing I wanted to be doing, or perhaps you'd be expecting from me, is to be here and arguing in favor of building a parking garage. But the fact is, try as I have to rename it as a mobility hub and to get include bicycle parking and electric charging stations and all the rest. The fact is, it's mostly a parking garage, and the fact is, it's in response to both occasional existing parking shortages, anticipated parking shortages, and a very strong community concern that there will be parking shortages, particularly to serve the existing Main Street businesses. So while over 1,000 spaces are being removed from Lansdowne Park permanently, all this is doing is putting back 100 spaces, and it's putting them back in a place that's intended to help the existing BIA, the existing businesses, offer reliable parking supply to their customers. And that includes residents of the glebe, many of whom walk, but still plenty of whom, when it comes to doing major grocery shopping, hardware, etc., still do need some parking. It is also going to provide a solution to some other challenges. Winter snow parking restrictions is one, a new demand from school expansion and need for teacher parking. A variety of other things have come up that are creating new sorts of parking pressures. In response to, or perhaps to address the design itself, there was quite an extensive public consultation opportunity. The numbers of people who chose to come out to those events were fairly small, which, combined with the fairly small number of emails and calls I got opposed to it, a very small number, I took mostly as a sign of, oh well, it's not that we love it, but we're not going to, we understand the need for it, we're not going to fight it. We did have a very useful set of design charrettes and involvement of the local community, representatives of residents of some of the neighboring streets, from the Glebe Community Association and the BIA, and the very strong signal we got was, let's not try to make this ye olde glebe-like. To try to create a 4-story red brick garage was going to make it massive, was going to introduce unnecessary costs. And in fact, if you step back and look around you for much of the adjacent blocks of the glebe, you'll find that red brick is only about a third of what you find there. There is quite a wide variety of building types and finishes. So in fact, the signal we got from the participants was more, give us a distinctive structure rather than try to make it look as close as possible to a typical 1920s glebe building. The end result is we are where we are now. We did hear from a number of residents, attempted to address those concerns. The question of the blank sort of solid wall versus the open space, there's pros and cons to those. Natural ventilation, lightness of the structure is one benefit. The downside is, yes, there will likely be some additional noise coming out from that wall. So the design team had attempted to address that as best they can. There's also the factor that if you reach the point where you need to introduce mechanical ventilation as opposed to natural, you're also introducing new machinery and hum and ongoing noise. So there was no perfect solution, no perfect design. I don't sit here today saying everybody's going to love this garage, but it is something that I, in the end, believe needed to be built, and that the design team, with participation from the community, has done their best to make acceptable. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to this item? You must admit, Council, we do find it ironic. You know? After, yeah, I won't regale you with what Clive Doucette often told us. We'll leave that to the history books. So, members of committee, on the item, is it carried? Carried. Okay, there we go. Okay. Are there any notices of motion? Inquiries? Other business? Okay. We are adjourned until the 28th of January. Thanks, everyone.